In today's video, we're going to be focusing on the Bitcoin roadmap. We'll be talking about these current phases that we might be embarking upon, having already experienced these similar phases back in the previous price discovery uptrends and corrective phases that we've already seen in this cycle. So subscribe to the channel for more videos like this in the future. Like this video if you enjoy content like this going forward, and let's dive into it. But before we dive in, a quick message from our sponsor. Our sponsor for today's video is bitfinex, and they are a really great crypto exchange for you to consider for your daily crypto trading and investing. They are a no KYC, no VPN futures exchange, and their liquidity is on par with the top exchanges. Users can trade over 700 trading pairs with up to 125x leverage without restriction. And to celebrate our partnership, we're running a very special offer. From September 2nd until October 2nd, you can sign up using my link and deposit $100 to get a 20% deposit rebate and get up to $2,000 trading bonus when you trade on bitfinex. Deposit reward will be distributed on every working day, and trading rewards will be distributed after the campaign ends. And for more info, check out the link in the description down below. Thank you very much, bitfinex, for sponsoring this episode. Let's dive into this one. Let's talk about what we've seen over the past few weeks, because it's clear that we're in a corrective phase. We're in price discovery correction number 2. And the thing about price discovery correction number 2 is that it's going to be a shorter and shallower corrective period. Generally speaking, the deeper we get into a phase of the bull cycle, the shallower and quicker these corrective periods need to become so that we can fit inside the traditional halving cycle. So we can see that after the halving, after the immediate halving, we saw a very prolonged, extended period of clustering and consolidation after the halving, which also we saw quite a bit of deep retracement during that period of time. But as time went on, still any sort of pullback was pretty prolonged. It did take time. It was still a deep retracement, but a little bit shallower based on what we've seen in the immediate post-halving moments. And of course, this corrective period is far shallower in terms of retracement depth. And you can see that very clearly, 33% in the immediate halving event, starting from the pre-halving top. This was a 33% pullback over a period of 8 months or so. And then the next pullback that took place was a little bit shallower. And you could even say that it was shorter as well, by quite a fine margin. And now we're seeing a 13% pullback over only a period of a few weeks, really. So it took months for this corrective period to resolve. It also took a good several weeks for this corrective period to resolve. Now this is only a handful of weeks that we're seeing this pullback take place, and it's more than half as shallow as what we've seen in the past, so just 13%. And of course, you could make the case that we're going to be pulling back much more over the next few weeks, but in fact, we're seeing more confirmation signals potentially for price actually resynchronizing with this range. So that's something actually we need to talk about, because in terms of the Bitcoin roadmap, we tend to see these downside deviations below reaccumulation ranges. Generally speaking, if you look to this cycle overall, we tend to see reaccumulation ranges develop in the pre-halving period and also in the post-halving period. The only difference is that in the pre-halving period, you see downside deviations in the form of downside wicks, so really capitulation moments and so-called paper hands being shaken out of their positions over here. But at the same time, bargain buyers really aggressively stepping in and being rewarded for those efforts. In the post-halving period, we've seen downside deviations, but they've been taking place over several weeks. And in fact, these downside deviations have been taking place in the form of candle-bodied clusters of price action beneath the respective analogous range low that we're seeing in this particular range. But in this range, we also saw the same thing. Downside deviation clustering in price action beneath that range low before resynchronizing and reclaiming that range via a support retest here. We saw the same support reclaim and retest here. We saw that retest also end this respective downside deviation. And so going forward in this corrective period, for this to be a confirmation of the end of this price discovery corrective period, we need to see a weekly close and a post breakout retest in this sort of vein within this current reaccumulation structure. So just closing above 114k would be sufficient. So do we see something like this where we see a few weeks of clustering around 114k, the range low, retesting that before rallying to challenge that final major weekly resistance before new all-time highs once again? Or do we get a relatively short retesting period before breaking to those new highs once again? Generally, the goal is to simply reclaim 114k. Bitcoin is on the cusp of weekly closing above there and preparing itself for that post-breakout retest to then rally right across the range and try and break beyond this final weekly resistance so that I can transition away from this price discovery correction number 2 and enter that final exponential price discovery uptrend number 3, the final probably leg in this cycle. And in terms of price discovery corrections, we can see that they are getting shallower, they're getting shorter, and that simply needs to happen in the final stages of the cycle. But what we're also seeing is potentially price discovery uptrends are also lessening in terms of the upside that they can produce. What's interesting is that, generally speaking, in price discovery uptrend number 3, or number 1 here, it took a good few weeks, 6, 7, 8 weeks or so, for this uptrend to run out and transition into a pullback. It took roughly the same amount of time, maybe just a week removed, for price to peak locally, perform a local top in price discovery uptrend 2 before pulling back into price discovery correction number 2. So we saw lesser upside, but the amount of time that this upside took place within was really very similar. In fact, almost identical. 6 weeks here and 7 weeks here. So going forward, once we're able to break that final weekly resistance so that we can enjoy price discovery uptrend number 3 to new all-time highs and beyond, it'll probably take the same amount of time again. Could we see 7 weeks beyond this resistance, 6 weeks beyond this resistance? And if we're getting a shortening in the amount of time that these price discovery uptrends last, what if we just get a 5-week uptrend and still see that upside over a period of 5, 6, 7 weeks, but also be pretty cognizant of the fact that maybe we're going to be seeing diminishing returns here? The other perspective, obviously, is that, well, if we saw such great upside here and limited upside here, which was really probably just 20% of this upside here, what if we're now going to see price discovery uptrend number 3 try and make up for whatever limited upside that was able to be generated in price discovery uptrend 2, and try and catch up and make up for that lost upside in this final phase of the cycle? So if we do have 5, 6, 7 weeks of upside going forward in price discovery uptrend number 3, then it's going to be relatively simpler, not easy, but simpler to try and understand, roughly speaking, how much time do we have before we actually peak in the bull market. And that all depends on the moment in time that we're able to reclaim that final major weekly resistance here, so that we no longer prove or perform these upside wicks where FOMO buyers get caught out and then we pull back into a retrace. If we're able to weekly close above this major resistance and retest it into support, then that price expansion would probably occur. Because usually in this cycle, we've just seen strong weekly candles break out from their ranges without really looking back here, with the exception of what happened over here. This is the first time in this cycle, upon range breakout from these reaccumulation ranges, where we saw retesting clusters of price action develop on top of the range, even downside deviating below those ranges, which is why this has been a cycle of not only reaccumulation ranges, but downside deviations overall. And we see another downside deviation develop around this retesting phase. So this was the first time where we saw a retesting, post-breakout retesting phase take place before we expanded into upside over here. So could we once again see a retesting phase take place like so around the top of that weekly range high here, that final major weekly resistance before new all-time highs. If we do see that post-breakout retesting here, then maybe that could even lend itself to slightly extending that price discovery uptrend phase overall, because if price just pauses on top of this range, then that price discovery uptrend doesn't really begin. It doesn't really discover new prices beyond old all-time highs. It just kind of sits there, builds a bit of buy-side momentum before expanding. So at this point in time, price is simply trying to confirm the end of its price discovery correction, and it's trying to confirm the beginning of resynchronizing with this range. We've seen many moments of clustering and then downside deviation and then resynchronization many times over the course of this cycle. And going forward, once we do see a reclaim like so of the reaccumulation range low, then it's going to be only a matter of a few weeks that we rally towards the range high and then break out beyond it. And we can see that maybe after successful retesting of the range low as support, it took a few weeks here for that price breakout from the range overall. Here, it took half of that time. So maybe we're seeing a quickening, an acceleration in how quickly it takes to not just resynchronize and reclaim the range low and resynchronize with the range overall, but to actually also rally right across it in its entirety and also break out from it altogether. So given the fact that this is a really narrow range based on what we've seen in the past, this isn't necessarily out of the ordinary, because we saw a very narrow range back here in late 2022 near the bear market bottom, and that range was pretty identical in terms of width in how we saw price behave within it. So we've seen narrow ranges develop in the past, not to mention this pre-halving range over here as well. So it's very easy to discount, well, maybe this range doesn't exist, but we've seen similar ones exist. That's why we can't quite say that this wide, or at least very narrow range is simply made up. I think that this is definitely a legitimate range to take into account, especially since it's showcasing all the necessary downside deviatory behavior from previous ranges, because we did indeed see clustering at these highs in a very similar manner and vein to what we saw back here. So this is indeed a very likely and legitimate range. So reclaiming 114k as a support, that's going to be the key to resynchronize with this range, and then we might actually see a very quick ascent to the range high, in which case we'll have to look out for a weekly close and post-breakout retest above that range high resistance, so that we can then see a multi-week period of upside from Bitcoin. And then we'll have to look at weeks 5, 6, and 7 potentially for topping out in the bull market overall. So that's the roadmap. We're really in the final innings and final stages of this bull market. Many people are, of course, talking about an extended phase, an extended cycle, but it does look like we're slowly coming out from this corrective period and slowly going to be transitioning into that final uptrend to new all-time highs before slowly but surely descending into a bear market. So thanks so much for tuning in. Thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel for more videos like this in the future. Like this video if you enjoy content like this going forward. I'm Rekt Capital, and I'll speak to you in the next one. Speak to you soon.